Good afternoon, everyone. For those that I have not met, my name is Rob Golan. I'm the Senior Director of Membership Sales and Engagement at the board. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Feel free to grab anything from the back if you want a coffee or a drink. Those are all available to you. After the session ends around 1:15, 1:30, we will be hosting a quick networking session as well, just outside of the room where the other participants will be gathering. So feel free to join us for that. There will be snacks and refreshments there as well. And we will be saving time at the end of the session too for Q&A. So if you do have questions, obviously feel free to save them for the end. Jeremy will be taking some of your questions then. I just wanted to obviously thank everyone for joining us this afternoon and for participating in Lighthouse Labs workshop on fostering emerging talent, shaping tomorrow's leaders for success. Today we welcome Lighthouse Labs CEO Jeremy Shaki to discuss essential strategies for empowering emerging talent in effective task management, allowing senior staff to concentrate on high-impact initiatives, as well as explore the dynamic synergy between artificial intelligence and junior staff. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board's offices are located on traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. They share with us a sense of responsibility for intergenerational equity, the well-being of today and tomorrow. And now I will pass it over to Jeremy to kick off the session.
Up my coffee here. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Can we actually turn down the volume? Is that okay? I don't think I need it too much. I'd rather project, but perfect. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Robert. My name is Jeremy Shaki. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lighthouse Labs. Very excited to do this. This is actually the first time I do this specific presentation, so if you hate it, just let me know so I'll never do it again, okay? Just out of curiosity, right off the bat, who here is part of an organization that's, let's say, bigger than 500 people? Put up your hands. Perfect. 100 people, put up your hands. Okay, so we're talking sub-100. How are we fostering emerging talent and shaping tomorrow's leaders for success? Can I bother any of you right off the bat to set the tone a little as to why is this interesting to you, your role, and what you're looking for coming from a presentation like this? Absolutely.
We're experienced designers. We design food-focused resorts.
Awesome.
And our boss thought this would be good for us.
Excellent. Okay. Dream job, by the way. That's great. I never got to go that direction. Why did your boss think it was good for you, just so I know?
Well, actually, we are always ramping up with young talent.
Okay.
And we're sort of doing it maybe unofficially ad hoc. So how about finding out? And what you said about AI intrigued me. Can't wait to see how that's going to lead.
Perfect. Anybody else want to offer it up? Put you on the spot? Yeah.
I work at Windmill Microlending.
Nice.
We provide loans to immigrants and refugees who are restarting their careers in Canada. So we're trying to figure out how we can make sure they're supported in continuing careers so they're going to have job opportunities.
And if you're looking for a wonderful partner who does a great job, Windmill's excellent. We use Windmill. Okay, that's great to know. So I think, when people tend to come to a talk like this, there are a lot of different expectations. I want to make sure to tailor it to all of you. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. And I think in a space with sub-100, companies of sub-100 people, this is actually a very different conversation than in a corporate environment. You can imagine in a corporate environment, the idea of planning for succession, the kind of strategies that go into that, the time it takes and the resources put to it, could be pretty big budgets. There's a lot of different talent and people to talk to and think about who is an emerging leader in your company. Their programming is built out year over year over year. In a smaller company, you actually have a very different dynamic. And personally, I actually love talking to the smaller company because I am 10 years into my smaller company. We are, we've gone upwards of 200 people. We're about 100 right now. And so being in that size company, the idea of what leadership is actually dramatically different than in a corporate enterprise. The idea that there are a lot of different leaders in your company and how you are thinking about helping them gain the proper amounts of skills. And what you said, sir, what was your name? Ron. I'm just going to refer to you a lot now, both nice and not nice, all at once, okay? What Ron said, this idea of AI intriguing, is something that we're seeing more and more. And it's funny because you can have the AI conversation at a very technical level or a very how the world is going to end level. Or you could have it at a very foundational level, and it actually simplifies a lot for you to think about, okay? So I'm going to start today with, first of all, if you don't know Lighthouse Labs, we are a training institution. We do boot camp forms of education as well as upskilling. Our calling card has always been that our placement rate in web, data, and science type roles for our graduates is upwards of 90%, and we get them jobs within 180 days. Job market right now, that's changing a little bit as we kind of see it play out right now. But the key, while we've gotten jobs for people like that all across Canada in an online learning environment, is actually how we work with employers, not just to hire, but to get the ROI out of their juniors who then become their intermediates and then become their seniors, and why that works so well. And so to start today, I'm going to give you a tiny story of me in grade 9 doing a debate class, okay? And while I'm in this debate class, the teacher assigns the assignment is, you have to put up an essay together. You have to stand up and argue your case for the value of knowledge was my subject. And it was right around the time where the internet was coming along and Wikipedia was really starting to mess with different people's versions of plagiarism. And in general, plagiarism became more and more of an issue in school. And the cheeky person that I am, I basically started by saying, I started my whole speech by going, I think knowledge is going to be useless. I don't need to acquire any of it. It will all be online. It will all be on the internet. And all you need to be is charming. Am I charming? I also plagiarized my speech. You can see that it's hitting home, and I didn't have to do any of the work for it. I failed, just so everyone's really clear. I failed that debate. They were not happy with me at all. But there were 3 little things within that that I think are very relevant for today, even if it's just a grade 9er being kind of a jerk. First of all, I was absolutely wrong about knowledge, and all of us were. The idea that the internet just made knowledge more redundant did not happen. The fact that you need knowledge, the fact that you need domain understanding in your organizations and companies, people who actually know what they're looking at and staring at that, and understanding how to contextualize all the different information coming in is more vital than it's ever been, and it will be with AI as well. People who know your space and know what you're doing are key, because knowledge is not easily acquired. The hardest thing to train anybody on is knowledge. It's why experience still means junior, intermediate, senior. It's not for the skills, though. The skills are things that, yes, you can develop stronger and stronger skills, but skills are one of the most easily taught things that you can do if you do it properly. But what you can't do is teach skills by just giving someone some passive knowledge, saying learn it, and now you have an easy approach to apply. And I think if I go back to that debate, and I go back to grade 9, I would tell you right away that I was flat out wrong, and that this concept of knowledge and what we have in our people is why investing in your future leaders becomes vital, because it's just untrainable in any other way. The second part that I didn't really see coming was that my teacher, when they put that presentation together, told us what the goals were, which was to have a debate and make your point. And I don't think she did a great job at all of telling me what the real value of what we were teaching is. And that's because what she actually wanted was me to have to go through writing something, writing my thoughts, arguing a point, having someone counter-argue the point, realize what I did or didn't say articulately, realize how the room reads it, take those learnings and be able to apply it in any space at any time, which when you plagiarize a speech like that, you can't really know what you did well or didn't do, and so if I had to do it again, I'd have gained very little. And that's important for all of you, because the way you are going to help any emerging leader is actually being very succinct about what the job is that you are going to want them to be able to do with the skills you are training them. And it's the biggest mistake in any kind of trainings and any kind of learnings, are that we spend too much time, when I say the word data, being like, you have to be better at data. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. And so understanding on your ends as leaders, if you are putting together learning programs, if you are trying to help leaders emerge, do not waste your leaders' time. Figuring out how you are training someone is vital, and in the world where everything is changing, in the internet and now AI and all these things are coming, it's actually quite hard to understand for your future leaders what are the core skills they need. The last part, if it's a goal of skills and what's the goal of learning that skill, is what's the real goal and the ROI to the organization as a whole. And that's the third part that people do really wrong. And in my classroom, had my teacher said, well, the goal of this practice is that you do this thing, it's not just completion, it's this idea of let's make sure that you know how to debate and you know this and you know that. That's my learning goal. But the real goal was that the world is always going to change around you, and how to take your idea and thought and argue it against someone else with a very strong backing and articulate form to shape other people's minds is probably one of those skills that is going to be tangible for the rest of your life. And that's why you need that skill. And that's the bigger goal from that one little thing I did. But in an organization, the skills you're teaching should be leading to a bigger ROI and a bigger goal for your company. And that's really important. There's the difference in why the learner is learning it, why you're teaching them the one thing they're doing in the moment, and then what you are ultimately after by going through that practice. And that's what we're going to talk about today, those 3 levels, so that you can all think about this. As this is kind of framed as a workshop, I'm just going to advise all of you 2 things. You can interrupt me anytime you want, and if you have a question, no problem taking us off paths. I'd much rather be interactive than a podcast. Second of all, as we're doing this kind of thing, I suggest if you have a notebook and pen, the first 3 things I'd write is my bigger goal, the skills goal, and then what I specifically want people to learn in the future, okay? If you were to take any of that and start piecing that together, the truth is that the people in this room, if you are in charge at all of thinking about this kind of stuff in your org, you're the ones who need to put in the work well before all your employees and learners do. And that's been where I've seen the hardest road. We talk to organizations across the country. What I can share with you is that the first and most important skill that comes up amongst any other for emerging leaders is data, especially as AI is entering the workforce. You have probably a bunch of you, some senior leaders that are very knowledgeable. They don't need all that data-informed element to know their instincts in making decisions, and they likely have become successful in doing that, being maybe partially data-informed, but by being whoever they are, okay? Knowing the market the way they do. Maybe they worked in it for 20 years, like whatever that is, but that's very hard to replicate. The truth is in people coming up, whether it's big or small in organizations, relying on someone to just know is very difficult. Data informed is one of the most important skills for an emerging leader. That big goal that I talked about, these are 3 examples that come up all the time when we're talking to whether it's enterprise or small companies. One is the role of data in digital transformation. Okay, so with AI coming in as an example, and I'm just using it because Ron gave it to me, the idea that you are going to be having projects and working on AI integration in your company, you can't really do it without a depth of understanding of data and what that data is going to mean to your AI. What that data is going to mean when you are trying to train it for your particular purposes. What data means in general to a company is not just a number, it's an insight, and an insight is matched with knowledge and the data itself. So roles in digital transformation start with knowledge of data. Roles in beating competitors. So this one comes up a lot at more corporate levels. Companies that leverage data analytics are 2.2 times more likely to outperform their peers in terms of financial performance. You can imagine me sitting in front of Toyota Canada and having a larger conversation around what they are trying to build in terms of a data transformative company. That's the number, that's the goal. We believe that over time, training people in data will give us an advantage over our competitors that is real significant. That's not about the employee, it's not about the specific job, it's truly a meta goal for the company. This is what we're investing in for 5 years, easily in this path, in order to obtain this result. The third, integration of data and decision making. We actually see this a lot. Data scientists are expensive, data analysts are expensive, and you try and get them to give you insight that give you real answers to whatever you're looking for, and the problem is they don't understand your domain. Just so I know, how many people here are HR professionals? Put up your hands. 1, marketers, sales, marketer, sort of, kind of. Okay, what do you do?
Run a marketing and data implementation.
Okay, do you find, so you run the company itself?
Yeah, I don't.
Amazing. Do you find that a data analyst who's never been in marketing is extremely valuable for you? Hard question.
Very low.
I loaded it on purpose. Go for it.
We teach everybody marketing. It's the fundamentals of everything. It's a science backed by data from day one. So it's the easiest thing to train somebody on, but it's the hardest thing to master because it has a good longevity as a training cycle.
But if they don't know data, not so useful either?
They wouldn't know marketing if they don't know data.
Perfect. That's a better answer than I could have given you, which is that is the way that many professions are starting to move more and more, whether you realize it or not. The merging of a domain and data is happening, and to not know either one is problematic. The last version of data integration in companies was data scientist, data analyst, feed data, build data warehouses, give you everything as far as insight goes, and then you can just look at the data and make decisions. That's not effective, it's not efficient, and the insights come from your people who work in their different spaces, actually understanding how to think about data well enough that they can pull the real insights they are looking for. This last one comes up more than any other conversation I have across Canada with companies and corporations. The idea that they are looking for executives, leaders, and domain, and people within all their domains being better analysts themselves. Now, that's what they want. That's the major goal. And you thinking about what your major goal is your organization, whether it's regarding data or not, something worth your own time to think about. But when it actually comes to emerging leaders, the reason this becomes really important is back to the point that I said, older leaders are not necessarily good at this. And the best thing that they have on their right side is emerging leaders who do know the domain, but are using data more significantly, not just because it informs that older leader, not just because that new leader is gaining their own insight, but because what they're actually trying to build for the next version of their company is a data culture. That's what most companies right now are chasing over time, because the first iteration didn't work well because a lot of top-end leaders are actually not excellent at using data themselves. So what happened is there's lots of data trainings out there for a lot of people, and then all of a sudden it kind of dies when it comes to its importance when you're talking to your manager or a bigger leader who's emerged without these types of skills. Building a data culture was actually one of the sub-goals at the top end, and whether you're a small company or big company, I'd actually tell you at a small company level, that's a majorly important time to make sure every person is data informed and that you can build a data and learning culture, because you need to be as efficient as possible. You don't have 500 people. You don't have 1,000 people all playing their own specialized role. You need people who know what they're looking at, who have a strong build of knowledge themselves, and are not shy about using data. So the idea that future leaders are going to be required to set a good example of their teams is one of the things listed as to why a data culture is the actual goal. Helping companies evolve in its data journey so that they're a part of it. That means when they become bigger leaders, they've been shepherding that company on that front already. Encouraging a data-driven approach to decision-making. When they talk with someone on their team, they go, tell me what the data is behind that and make it valuable, because that last part, making data accessible and valued, when someone says, I don't have that data, you want an emerging leader trying to figure out how to make that accessible, and you also want them validating that it is very important. That is where a data culture comes from that ideally can achieve any of these top 3 goals. Again, for the sake of today's conversation, I'm using data specifically so that all of you have a tangible anchor of a skill. But if it's not data as a skill that you care about at all, that's perfectly fine. You still need to think about this logic process. What's the big thing that the company achieves? What do I have to put in place for that company to achieve it, for my emerging leaders to lead and drive? Thus, this is now a skill for all leaders. Any leader in a company should be taking on this skill. But then the next part is breaking it down. And so where I've seen good companies right now in breaking down skills, they can maybe break it into 4 categories. Let's say data, okay? So is anyone here thinking about a skill that they really wanted taught in their organization, just so I know? I don't want to put pressure on you if you aren't. No? Okay, so then I'll keep going on this. This group had 4 ways of breaking down data, which is generally the way we do it. Descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. This is important because if you are going to share with your future leaders that they have to learn data, the first answer you are going to get is, I already know it. That's the first answer you tend to get from anybody you're trying to train on anything, is I already know this thing. And as a leader, they probably do know a good chunk of it. And so the first thing we've seen companies do well is they break down that skill into specific areas. Because a leader can be very good at descriptive or diagnostic and very poor at predictive and prescriptive. And that's the area where they actually need to emerge, is here. And that's not really for the leader to tell you, that's for you to tell the leader. And so immediately breaking down the components becomes more important. And what it should actually look like is something like this. And this is actually mapped out with a larger organization. This is the exact way we mapped out what they needed and wanted. I'll give you a second, just look at it and see if you understand when we say what data skills are needed, if that helps a little bit more of an understanding if I told you as a leader that that's what you needed as opposed to you need to be data driven. You need to be intentional when you want trainings to work. Back to my knowledge portion and cheating on a debate, it didn't matter if I didn't know what the goal was. I thought I'd actually accomplished the mission at hand. And as a person that was busy and had a lot in my life going on, I did it to the basic level that I needed to do where the reward would come. Your leaders aren't dumb. Your leaders are smart. And if they aren't, that's your first problem. But if they are, they will not take learning for the sake of learning as a good enough reason, and they definitely won't spend their time substantially diving into a subject if it's not of high value and not highly specific what you are trying to gain from it and what they need to do with it. Nobody is any different. Whether you talk about a big leader or you talk about a first-time learner at a junior level, they're all just trying to find the reward. The difference is at a junior level, someone might just trust you more and trust that what they really have to do is just show good things. And the further they go in their career, that slows down and slows down. But it's still the same problem for them. The real commitment to the learning is what am I getting as a benefit? Now in this case, none of this is about the learner yet. This is back to the organization. Why does it matter to the org is what's going to matter ultimately to anybody in a leadership position as to how you're training them. And so these things being different things that they can or cannot be good at, and this is specific to a company, and gaining these types of benefits. You can see it right here where a company is really looking at data, in this case, is actually in stuff like resource allocation. That's a real ROI to a company. Productivity and its profit levels. Productivity improvements. Tailored development and recognition rewards in the employee engagement and development, likely that feeds right into here. How do I keep people happy? How do I drive them better? How do I make sure they grow so I can spend less money on people and I can be more efficient in my resource development? How do I think about our risk management and long-term planning? That sets the goal for some of these pieces. Because if you're not thinking about that, then how you are efficient is different. And it goes up and up and up. And that's what they want their leaders' actual capabilities. They aren't, this isn't learn Tableau. Look at you, you now know Tableau. This isn't learn how to be a nice person, stakeholder management. Learn how to be well-spoken and give good talks is a very baseline learning. And how you measure that is almost impossible. But from a company perspective, this type of stuff, being very well lined up, is big. Now in a corporate, this is probably what it looks like. In your company, it can look less, it can be less, but it still comes all the way back to these groups. These are the subs of this, which is the sub of this. The big goal, the data culture, the broken down skills that they want to gain right now for that skills culture, and by the way, they'll have timelines applied to every one of these, and what the benefits they are going to get from people learning those skills. That's a company actually showing up, having done its work, that now can drive the leader into learning, which gets us then, and only then, to how you can train your future leaders. Robert, how am I doing for time, just so I know?
30 minutes.
Perfect. Yes? Be sharing. Yeah, we can share this deck afterwards. Absolutely. Happy to. Are there questions before I get into how to train leaders? Because that whole premise is the start on your work that even gets to a point where you're open to training leaders to get effective results. If you don't do that first part, don't even bother with the second part. That's my honest assessment and honest advice. It's a waste of dollars at a time where companies are laying people off, where money is more of a worry than it has been in previous times for a lot of different companies. Validating and justifying why you are spending money on learning is harder today than it was yesterday. And yet, skills gaps are very real in companies and are leading to a lot of wasted time, lack of productivity. There is a real ROI to learning. And we were talking before, you want your people to grow. You want to show them a path of growth, and you need to pick the skills that when they see those skills, they're not like, yeah, that sounds nice for growth, but is that even relevant in 2 years, and how does that really change things for me? That's why I use data, because it's the one that obviously comes up the most for us. Are there any questions about that first part? Setting up your company to even run training. Yeah.
I don't have a question or a comment.
Yeah.
So I said TRBOT, I wish I said demo, because that's what we implement. But it's just to back up everything you're saying. So a lot of people come to workshops and they don't like retain the information, but we do the left-hand side every single day. When we do implementations with people, it's often initiated by somebody who refuses to follow that.
As an agency for another company, you're saying, or internally?
We go and we do implementations for companies to set them up on like data strategy and doing these things, but usually, and especially in the last 8 months, that initiation has started by somebody who replaced somebody who refused to do this.
100%. Thank you.
Every time.
I swear I didn't plant him. Not a plant. Yeah, not a plant. That's what we see too. It's happening, and it's happening more and more. And this past year, there are 2 little signs in market that should make everyone raise their eyebrows. One is obviously just the general layoffs that have been happening, and the fact that companies are more profit-focused right now is very real. That's an easy one. But the one I've been pointing to the most is stuff in the EDI space or DEI space, where DEI agencies and groups that are doing DEI have been not making nearly as much money on contracts as they have in any previous 4 or 5 years. Now, that's not because companies are foregoing the DEI or EDI elements of what they do, but they're thinking about it very differently as to how they spend money on it, when actually everybody is fighting now for a chair, as opposed to they have too many chairs to give and not enough people to fill them, which is where things were. When you recognize that, you recognize you're in a space where everything you do has a little bit more of a why are you spending money on that versus this person that I want to keep, versus this employee that I want here. What are we doing about spending $80? And when you spend money gallantly but brazenly in your organization at this point, a lot more people have questions today than they did yesterday. And that's something for everyone to think about in terms of time. It's not just spending money, it's where you ask people to spend their time. Because you're asking them to be efficient. And if you want an efficient company, the worst thing is when a leadership isn't thinking efficiently themselves. The funny thing about efficiency and doing it well is it is not what I did with the debate, which is to just get to the fastest point right in front of my nose and just get away with it and move on. Real efficiency sometimes takes a little bit of time to do it very effectively, because that you're looking for a really bigger solution to your problem. And that's where we see one of the biggest problems in the second part, which is how do you set up your learners? So if you think about your learners, tons of people, who here has taken an online course? Just so I know, online course, put up your hands, cool. Who's earned a certificate online? Put up your hand, badge, micro badge, anything like that, yeah? Okay, I guess, can I bug you for this one? Am I looking to put you on the spot? What was the course? Okay. Did you find when you did those, okay, so a little different, I'm going to try and separate the doing your master's online, which is a big component, and then like a micro badge like on LinkedIn Learning. Did you complete all your LinkedIn Learning courses that you did? Yeah? Did you use those skills? Okay. Did anyone have a different example where they did use the skill that they learned online? Yeah, go ahead. Springboard? Yeah. Nice. Like so full, almost boot camp certificate. Amazing. Are you a UX designer? Now, Springboard versus LinkedIn Learning are two slightly different things. LinkedIn Learning is very passive. You sit in front of it, you engage with it, nobody's around you, you're just doing it. Were you in a cohort of people? That's on its own right away, major difference. Did you do hands-on versions of what you were learning? Were you doing project-based learning? The whole thing. Did you have, was yours, would you call it project-based? Or was it just little exercises and activities? This first one right here is, there's way too much, back to knowledge on how much this impacts your learning. That the idea that we will just hop online and do a content-based course and take away anything, well, honestly, it would probably ruin your business because everyone could just learn what they needed to learn and just do their implementation properly without ever having to go through the exercise of doing it. They just know the knowledge, just acquired, they're good. It doesn't work like that. This is, we're talking like 10 to 15 times more effective learning, depending on the study you read, around project-based. Because when you actually have to do something and implement it and put it in place and you don't get there, you realize what you don't know. And that's often where a lot of people quit, which is why they have to have a strong enough motivation to get through. But doing something and using your knowledge to actually put it in an applicable way, learning is hard. Learning is about problems and how you overcome them. If learning is easy, you probably didn't learn the thing in the first place or need it. The learning is actually in how you do something real. So back to those skills in the debate that I had to do, I skipped over the hard part of what I was supposed to learn. The parts where you make mistakes, where you have to think about why did that work or not work? Why was that effective? Project-based learning encourages participants to engage in hands-on projects that simulate real-world challenges. Emphasizing learning through experience rather than passive learning is a must, which means that the best learning is actually in the workplace. This is why people advance in their careers. This is why knowledge is so important and experience is so important, because doing the job year over year is actually what makes you much better at doing your job than any certificate you've ever gained at any time. It's critical. You needed the foot, you needed that baseline to get there. But doing the job gives you that context and knowledge, and that's a project-based learning. You are working on projects and work. It's the same thing. So when you are building any kind of learning in your space, if it's passive and it's just read me, or it's just watch a video and take it in, just know that you are competing with every piece of content out there. And honestly, I scroll my Instagram for an hour and look at all those small little reels, and by the time I've left it and a day later, my retention for it is almost zero. It's quite sad how we consume content at this point. Engagement metrics, certificate completion, all these metrics, they're just meant to make you feel like you've earned, like you've done something, but if you can't apply it on the job, what's the point? And this is where the problem is. Because the next part is, this is what a learner needs to feel like, and this is what an organization needs to feel like. If you are teaching them, they need to be outcomes obsessed. And in order for this second point, to measure success not by completion rates, by how well participants can apply their newly acquired knowledge and skills in their roles, you can't just give them material to just learn. You've got to set up something where that success is validated in the actual work they do for them to see, because that's what creates a culture of learning. A culture of learning is where when someone learns stuff, there's real reward attached to it. It doesn't mean salary and it doesn't mean title. It means they actually feel the impact of what they learned on the work they do to do their work better, and everybody else goes, whoa, that was great. The outcome is key. Yeah.
So I have an employee who has a metric every year to improve like her use of data and make like day-to-day decisions. She generally tends to go by her feelings. The feelings are often right, but I want her, we're a database organization. I want her to make decisions based on data. It's really easy for me on her, phone support to have LinkedIn learning courses and data. But how do I, what am I using if I'm trying to pull that she actually used data and use it to make decisions? It's harder as a manager.
A breakdown like this. So the first thing is you'd start with, right, do they know what data, can you explain the data types or data sources you use to inform you? did they actually interpret the data and show you something with it, right? Now, on one hand, it may just be backing exactly what they already thought. Fair enough. But that's where actually, at a bigger organization, and this is where I hesitate, because even in my organization, we don't do this. Levels of proficiency is something, if you ask ChatGPT tomorrow to give you levels of proficiency for data literacy all the way to data analyst, it could probably pump out something that's not that far off. And in reality, that's what you're measuring against. This is not binary. This is a spectrum. Whenever you're trying to teach someone something, don't teach them at the binary level. Did you learn how to speak in front of a room or not? Okay, that would be level 1. Did you learn how to speak in front of a room? Did you learn how to do it effectively? Well, what's the effective part? Did you stop saying Did you use your hands a lot? Did you pace? Did you tell a stupid story about when you were in grade 9? These are things that, like, what the spectrum is in an organization that's well thought out on data, and we have a great case study on a few of them. They have level 1 to level 9 first, and that way as a manager, because here's the other problem in a bigger company, a manager, they are not supposed to come up with all that themselves. It needs to be tied to how a company views data skills and data sets. At that level, level 1 to level 9, they can say, actually, this person has now officially moved from level 3 to level 4. And by doing so, they did get a little bit of a pay bump, or they are added extra work, or there are things that they're doing. And as an emerging leader, you start by saying no emerging leader is here without a data level 6, which we get brought into organizations in that specific a function of, hey, we want to move our leaders from level 4 to level 7, but we have a problem. They're either not motivated, they're too busy, the content we've given them isn't doing it, they don't know the value to them. Cool. Come up with a curated, very well orchestrated strategy to them getting there, because it's worth a lot of money to the company for them to do that. Fine. In a smaller company, it doesn't need to be that well orchestrated. But if you tell any employee of yours that you want them to get better at data, and you aren't specific enough about what you mean to that exact question, you'll probably be doing them a disservice, and you probably won't get the result you want. You want to be specific. Being specific will help them feel a lot better about this, which is really part of what you are training them for in a data scenario, at least, which is, why do you want them to know data? Because you want them to be outcomes obsessed. You want them to actually be able to achieve results. You want them to care about getting the right result that they want. Why don't you for them? So measuring success not by completion rates, like I'd say completion rates should be dead already, and they're about to die with AI. AI can make anything be complete. And if you don't have a good enough criteria behind it, that's all you're going to get. A bunch of plagiarized fake versions of what real result you were looking for. Which brings us to practical learning. On the practical learning side, it sounds a lot like project-based learning, except project-based is making it hands-on, and practical is about the content actually being applicable to the roles and responsibilities. So what you had said, and what was your name? Shannon. So what Shannon just said that she did great was that she said, hey, listen, in your role, I need you making a more data-informed decision. That's great, because that's in the role, it's in the responsibility. It's not saying, hey, go learn some data skills. I'm happy you did it. It's use it in the job, then show me that you used it in the job. The more you are delivering content, the more you're asking them to actually do very specific things on very specific tools with very specific outcomes, the more you will get someone who's working through that. Now, if it's one-offs here and there, it'll still feel very incohesive, which is why you need to think about this at a little more of a global level. But either way, delivering content that's immediately applicable to the participant's role and responsibility, providing real-world scenarios and case studies that allow the participants to see the relevance of their learning, why it's important, and enabling the learner to bridge the gap between theory and practice, ensuring what they learn could be used immediately. Tell me that if I told, like, here you are, all are today. I'm talking at you. I am content. I'm just a screen. I could be on your videos. You could have, we're recording this. I'll send it to somebody else. Here I am. Ideally, we get some engagement. Maybe I get to network with you later. Cool, a little bit of additional value. But unless you're putting this into practice right after, how much are you really going to walk away from this in 1 year? I'm going to say, what did you do with this? And it'll be minimal. as leaders, you are all busy. Meaning that unless I came to you with something that's really specific, like why would you want to waste your time? This is you being efficient, an hour here, an hour there. But if this is really important to you, you need to think about how you are applying it. You need to think about how this is really relevant to creating the right theme park. Because on your end in the theme park, you know that ticket sales, I'm just going to guess here, by the way. I'm going to go by my knowledge of cartoons or TV shows that depict what it is to build theme parks, or Succession at least. But the idea of what it takes, the data that it takes to build for ticket sales, for ride enjoyment, for amount of time spent in the park, for the kind of things at maximum dollars for profit, but that are of quality, that are top end, what you want to be, the whole thing. If I apply my learning stuff right into something that you are specifically working on that actually makes you better by the end of it, that's the big win. The big win is I just saw myself get better. The bigger win is the organization just saw me get better. And the biggest win is by the organization seeing me get better, I gain something from it, and we are on a plan that is moving the organization forward on their bigger goal. And that relevance is just lacking in most content and learning that you're doing. People don't have the time and space to do it. But it's also, on the opposite end, what's wasting a ton of people's time in terms of learning in general, like a ton. You're just learning glossaries and acronyms, which when dealing with more, I'd say for anybody, but honestly, I'd say from your junior level on one hand, and then your strongest people on the other. You do not see a lot of executive training that is async online. It's just not, why are people spending $5,000, expert leaders, to go to places and be with a group of peers and go through something together? Why? Because that's actually where the value is. The value is doing it with people. That what we see in our boot camp every day is people motivate people. People push people and challenge them. And when I see my peers going through something and actually advancing on that skill set, both the competitiveness in me, as well as just I see it being possible and I see what everyone else is doing, it makes it count. And I want to feel like I matter about being there. The second I don't have to be there, then it doesn't matter in the first place. If it doesn't count, it doesn't matter. Being able to do peer-to-peer, peer-based engagement and cohort-driven. So I asked you about, you said Springboard. Yes, the project-based learning is key. Yes, they have an outcome that their outcome is ideally you should be able to be good enough to get a job, just like ours. That's a pretty solid outcome for them in this space. They know companies have to validate it. That's all good. But the key is they have a cohort-based model and they have an async model. Which one did you take? Cohort-based. You're with a bunch of people learning at a time. Do you still have those relationships? You never interacted with them? Okay. How did you struggle with that at all? The alone time? It's okay. You don't have to make. I'm going to make that point either way. But did you like? How did you feel about it? Okay. Yep. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you tried to at least circle it for me. Because that is why accelerators do it. That's why good programs do it. It's why universities still hold most of their cohort models, and it's why MOOCs, the meta online, open online courses, have really struggled. If you're not in it with a group of people and you're not moving forward together on this type of stuff, your learning hits. Now in a workplace, that can be really complicated. Doing peer-based learning, having everybody have the same time and space. The amount of companies that start with us telling us, listen, just maybe have the content, they can do it on their own, and maybe they'll come together for one day and they'll do like a demo. And we basically say no. And we say no because we did it at the beginning, and we did a bunch of it, and it never worked out. And the client always said, well, I don't know if we should redo this. It was great, great. Tons of people learned things, but it was great, but I don't know if we should do it again because the value ultimately didn't come out. People need to be pushed. Learning is not the job is the job. And don't ever forget it. Learning is an opportunity to be doing more successfully to the benefit of the company, but it's hard to prioritize that sometimes over the job. Other people doing it all together really helps. Why is John not here? Is a really powerful mechanism, and then also working together on those project-based pieces, really important for someone not wanting to let down that group, and someone learning from others in the margins, other leaders. Which brings me to the last part, which is contextualized content. Showcase how concepts, theories, and best practices directly relate to your company's products, services, and operational processes. So before, I said it's about the job. Make it relevant to the job. But the other part is the context in how it actually delivers for your products, services, operational processes. What's real is where companies get very good at sharing a learning culture that everybody else starts to understand the value of doing. And that's where highlighting success stories and case studies that demonstrate the application of learning within your unique business environment. At Lighthouse Labs, what I do is I put on the front and center of my website every day, all the time, what our placement rate is. Now, our placement rate is not a learning. The placement rate is not the curriculum. It's not the teachers' names. It's not the dollars you're spending. It's not the dates it starts. But it definitely demonstrates success. And for people to feel motivated enough to get through what is hard learning, and I mean that, hard learning, they need to feel that the reward at the end is going to be good. And the best way they know it is not by me telling them. The best way they know it is when they've seen examples of others gone through it who look like them, resemble them, feel like them, and are actually there to talk about that success themselves. And so whether you've done it internally or not, taking on your own personal learning, something that worked that's like the way you are setting it up, and sharing that appropriately is really critical for why others might do it or not. And then when you have built it, your trading, and it is coming out, one of the first things, it's more important than running that next group of learners through it, is actually just sharing why it made all the difference on your products, your operations, the big goal, the small goal, the learner's goal, the salary, everything, and why that person's walking away happier. Because if you really want to create the data culture, that's critical. Any questions about this? Any of these 5 before I move on to the last part? Does it seem, I mean, out of curiosity, just show of hands and I will not be offended because I want to make sure this is tailored myself to all of you. Is this relevant to why you showed up? Is it a valuable information for you as you think about taking this back to your own company? Just pop up your hand if it is.
It's very abstract, and I'm trying to filter everything you're saying to how, when I go back to my boss, and we're designing a part, and I got a deadline, and I got tired people, and I don't have enough people, how do I take that back and say, hey, listen, I got to protect this, and I have to promote this, I need to keep this in mind. It's too abstract. Off the cuff?
Yep.
Far too up the hierarchy of needs, far too abstract when you're busy meeting deadlines and people are tired.
I hear it. So what are you trying to teach them? What's the one learning, if you were going back to your boss in the first place, because you'd bring this back, and you know what you're not bringing back, to your point is, I have a full plan for a learning culture at my company for the next 5 years. So what's the one thing you want them to learn? As someone on your team? No, the people under you, or, I mean, if you, go ahead. The emerging profession.
Yeah, we work together, it's okay, go ahead.
I'm saying the bosses or the emerging professionals.
Well, what you just said, so tell me if I'm wrong, is you said if I go back and I try to use this to talk to my boss about what we should do, which I assume what we should do, the what, is how you deliver some kind of learning to some of your people. Is that a fair statement?
Right, now, to be specific and very quick,
Yep.
I have a range of very talented concept artists who keep their blinders on and pump out great concept art. But how do I turn them into leaders? I did it accidentally. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. But how do they do it purposefully?
Perfect.
So that's what I'm trying to tie it.
Perfect. What's one skill, any skill that you've thought about that you think helps someone who's generally a content writer who keeps their blinders on,
Right?
that'll help them be better prepared for as in a leadership position in the next 3 years?
Well, right off the bat,
Yep.
get up and articulate it. What did you do? What is he doing? Start comparing, start talking, because they're all in their funnels, because that's their job.
So communication?
Correct.
Okay. If you told them to be better at communication, would they get it?
That's not enough. I think what we need to do is what we used to have in the old days, sync board. Print it out, Doctor did. Print it out, put it on the board, talk about it. Yeah, exactly. So that might be, we don't do that anymore. So that might be a way to get people talking.
So, but see, you just showed up with the solution of how people can talk better. Are you trying to teach them how to do it the way you know how to do it? Or the question is, are you trying to train them how to be better communicators? Which one do you care about more? Just the communication improves, the end? Because that's good for your company. That's like, you know, I'm going to implement Slack in my company. People will have more instant communication. Good. ROI complete. I don't need to train anybody. Don't waste people's time. Just use it. The other is, I want them to be a leader in the future. That's where my leadership is going to come from. I want them to learn better communication skills. Which way would you say you're thinking about it right now?
Okay, I'd like them to learn better communication skills, but day in, day out, that's not what happens. Watch me in a meeting, see what I did, see how I made them laugh, see how we're all good, do that your way.
That's one of the hardest ways. You hear it, right? Like, I know you hear it. And I learned like that too. I don't want to dismiss it, because that is learning culture, right? That's a lot of people are exactly that statement. Just watch me and get better. That's what you're asking for that person to do is to be hungry as hell, really want what you have, move forward in the way you did it. But you have blinders too. You have things that you don't see. And are they really gaining skills, or are they mimicking and they don't actually know? Are they plagiarizing off the internet? The way they hear you tell a joke, they tell a joke. Where is their skill advancement? That's the key. If you want them being better communicators, and today you ChatGPT'd 5 ways of someone's improvement of communication skills, you picked one line in one thing and said, in the next 3 months, I want you to get better at this one part of communication on your own and apply it in this way in the workplace 5 times. Them having to think about that, you evaluating how they did it and telling them what they didn't do right or wrong, and you knowing how you're going to evaluate that will go a hell of a lot further than you telling them, just mimic me. And that's really what I'm getting at here is you could do that in an isolated, async way because, look, you're in charge of what? You're in charge of them getting the job done. You're going to tell them one thing. Someone in your org, what you really need to say is if we really want to advance skills, let's not pretend we're about advancing skills. Let's do it properly. This is the bigger thing that we have to do. And maybe we could do it with 5 or 6 people, because if we do it with 5 or 6 people and they're all in it together, they'll feel better about it. A communication skills program that advances all of them, but that you internally know how to measure what success looks like will matter a ton to those 5 people. And if they do it, and if they are successful in doing it, then everybody around them will have a better idea of what communication is. We'll see people leading communication skill, like advancing themselves, and will start to mimic that behavior. And you will create a better communication culture, which that's what I had said at the beginning, and your point about abstract, by the way, is bang on. And that's what I find difficult about anything like this, is if it's in the weeds, it's only relevant to 4 of you, and if it's abstract, it's not enough to be relevant to you, which is why I try to make this interactive, but it's difficult. But I called mine building a data culture. And I did it because this is what mattered. If your version of that is, we need to create a better communication culture, and we need to create a better communication culture because we only have 20 people, and everyone's got to know how to talk this stuff through so we can avoid shitty interactions or work that wastes time for everybody. We only have so much time. Is that why? Like, why do you think that matters at a company level for you?
Well, it's funny because we're criticized for not communicating up with each other. Meanwhile, we're beside each other 8 hours a day, so we're missing something.
And what do you think you would gain? What would the company's value be gained if your team improved in communication?
Well, I think we'd be more efficient. There'd be maybe less time pissing around and trying to make sure I'm speaking in general.
Yeah.
There'd be more focused effort with more focused results, I'm guessing.
So if I came to your company, I was talking about it, I'd say pick 3 natural things that happen poorly because that you can count. So we end up presenting things that the boss says was not well aligned. Or we have something where 2 people worked on the same thing, but they didn't work on it together, and that's called out, right? Circle that, count it for 3 months, and the next 3 months say our goal is to improve this where we have 5 less of these. Because what you're really trying to do is provide the ROI of the company of productivity improvement through communication. That's the benefit to the company. If you can say that and layer that, now you can tell your boss that, and then the idea is, well, then how are you shaping that learning? And like I said, you could just deal with one person. One person getting better data informed, but if they're doing it in a group, if they're doing it on stuff that's relevant to them, if you are saying, be better at communicating in these ways on these things in your projects, that's not a course. It's just better work integrated learning. Yep.
If I can also break down like one of the things that you said is like that would help, I think, or that would help, I guess. One of the things we often teach people is like if you just look at the overall metrics of the company, and then you say we want to improve the company, and we say okay, well communication will improve the company. What you were postulating is that like, or positing is that like if you do increase communication, other metrics will get better.
Excuse me.
Right. When you say like count that one thing for a while, the thing is this communication might not be the issue at all. And so like that's where it gets really strange. But building a data culture is the only way that you'll know whether the thing you just guessed hit the mark. It's a gamble every time you make a strategy decision like that, right? In the company, it's really hard to tell whether or not something's subjective, like communication helps. And the other thing is the project-based like thing that you were doing, project-based and then the contextual.
Yep.
When I moved from like being the person in my company doing the work to being the guy who's like, okay, I've worked out, like the thing I had to do is I had to transition people into the roles of doing stand-ups. So I gave them an option. 5 stand-ups in the next 3 months, you have to run. Let's go. And then your peers are going to mark you. Okay, you volunteered, but your metric is you have to do 5 and they all have to be above 75%. As soon as you started doing that, it was like, great, you're now a leader in stand-ups. You can do this. This is yours. Right. So like picking the project for them was, okay, you can watch me do it and we'll break it down together or we'll do dry runs. But having like a data culture is the only way you're going to be right. And then applying like some of these things, like I've done a lot of these things in my own company. They do work. It's just about figuring out what that project is and then contextualizing it effectively. Hard stuff.
It is. It's really hard. That's why, yeah.
I just wanted to add something.
Yeah.
I read this book yesterday, The Motive.
The which?
The Motive.
Okay.
Yesterday, I just finished it. It's exactly what he's saying. But his thing was like it has to start from the top. Because if the top is good, the bottom follows along.
100.
Like the disconnect with communication, it has to start from the top.
Like, yeah, do you want to add on to that point?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I was going to say, it's great if the top layer of the company buys into this, if they really understand it and comply to it, and then try to implement, hey, yes, there's a learning-based system that needs, that could eventually help the bottom line. But the example of our company, I think that the middle management is all present here. So the information, this knowledge and this desire for improving the system performance, we will take back, but we have to work both ways. So how do we also have to convince the top management so that there's an investment in learning time and learning approaches, and also train people to then be better and find ways of implementing.
I mean, I agree with both of you. So the name of this talk, right, Shaping Tomorrow's Leaders for Success, starts with a premise. Everything starts at the top, and the top doesn't always want to change, or at least the top is comfortable with who they are, but they're looking at everyone underneath and saying, well, they're not going to be me, so what are they bringing to the table? That's a very natural instinct in most corporates or small startups, okay? The founder-led fails 90% of the time after 4 years, okay? Not the year 1 problem is one thing, but 4 years because that person who started a company has maybe never actually built a company long, and so they think they know everything, they're in charge, all those things. Well, they end up at a place where they're just topped out, and they don't really know how to do more, and they struggle with it. Now, in a very small startup, that's a really hard problem to solve, right? A founder has to be open-minded enough to go, I may not be the good CEO, I may not be the good leader, but also I have to learn a hell of a lot more than everybody else to keep us moving forward, right? Like that's what you want in that kind of situation. But otherwise, what you really want is that your emerging leaders are taking on skills, whether it's communication skills, it could be data skills, it could be anything, that their natural propensity to leadership, along with those skills, start driving a different change in culture. Because I got to tell you, having run Lighthouse Labs for 10 years, I actually only have so much impact on my org. I give very specific mandates. I want things to happen. And depending on the level of work I do, it moves in that way. But really, it's about my middle management and all the rest of the people and how well they drive that changes everything in my company. Because they're the ones that people trust more. When a manager leaves a company, so does half their people almost all the time, right? Like, people follow their managers. People are connected in that way. So what we're saying here is no different than what you said, which is it should start at the top. But if a company is considering how to prepare leaders coming forward, identify the leader. So here, let's just go right to it at the end, because I'll give you the last slide, which is pretty much here. The first thing is identify who your future leaders are. The second part is create the learning and development plan for them. And the third is build a succession plan. Now, this is something I'd say to corporates. It's not what I'd say to this room. But I would say to a line of middle managers that if you are thinking on this level, you all find 1 to 2 things that are really core across your domains, and you can tie it to why company success is going to happen at a large level and a mid-level, what the skills are that are needed, how you're going to train them, and then how they're going to run across. I promise you, 2 of you will end up in bigger leadership positions minimum within the next 2 years. Because as managers, what you are doing is fostering something that you are taking the time to think about what your company needs and also driving it through leadership to everybody else, which is what everybody at the top wants. Everybody at the top wants not to have to think about it all, but for you to get that mandate and agenda, they don't just sign the check on learning for no reason. $1,500 for this person to learn something? We don't have that money right now. The goals of how it's tied in, that's what they're looking at from a leader. And then the results and that outcomes-obsessed piece is what they're looking at for a leader. That's why we use data more than anything else, and your point about data was key, is that it's built right into the way everybody learns and the ROI. If you can't prove the outcome of something you are driving, anything, you kind of look like a haphazard leader. That's why that's so important. And then your boss will evaluate, are you just too much of a data nerd and you actually don't know the domain at all and you don't know how to trust your instincts, and that'll be the opposite end of leadership training. Are you decisive? Can you go without data? Can you not just quote numbers and that's all you do? Which is what every person at the top wants. Every person at the top wants data informed, not data driven all the time, right? And finding that balance is kind of the critical part. Other questions? I don't know if that helped answer for you, because every level can apply this. Every level is the top of their own sphere until the budget comes in. Other questions? Okay. Well, if you do have any, you can come talk to me. We do run programs around all this type of stuff, both at like an open enrollment level where someone can send 1 person or 2 people. And if you ever do that, all I would suggest to you is send people with a very specific goal in mind and potentially the types of stuff that they can work on that is specific to your company, as opposed to just letting us guide in a, these are the basic things you have to do. And if your company is interested in this kind of stuff, we do it, tons of other companies do, but this is specific to how you are building emerging leaders with alternative skill sets that are actually set for your future. And you asked about AI, I said it at the beginning, I'll say it at the end. It is one of the most changing of the guards that is happening in front of us. Foundationally, it is all about data. Everything about AI is about the data that informs it. You don't need to think about this complicated. All you need to know is that your people understand how to look and think about data enough that they set up AI to do what your company needs, as opposed to the other way around, where AI just tells your company what to do. That is a critical distinction for anybody anywhere. And if anybody asks you what you're doing about it, I'd suggest that's number 1. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for listening to my podcast today. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and obviously thank you, Jeremy and Lighthouse Labs, for the session today. I hope you all enjoyed it. As I mentioned, we are going to be having a networking session just outside, so feel free to join us. If you did enjoy today's session, we do have more of these plans, so just make sure, A, you've subscribed to our newsletter, or you can follow us on our website at bot.com/events. We do host workshops monthly, and we have an array of other events, so you're welcome to attend those as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you do have any questions for Jeremy after, he's going to be available. If you do miss him, you can always reach out to us at the board, and we can obviously connect you with him as well. So thank you for coming. If you have any questions, reach out. If not, enjoy the networking as well. Thank you.